Hello, people. Finished a book yesterday. The White Nile. It's written by Alan Moorhead. I had judged a book by its cover when I bought this. I can't remember where I got it. But I thought this was going to be like geography. But it ends up being one of my favorite subjects. All the explorers that went up the Nile and went across Africa and went down the Nile and, tried to find the source of the Nile. That's basically what it is. And of course it goes through a lot of stuff that I have read before. But I really enjoyed this book. This guy writes very well, Alan Moorhead. And I have read another book by him. And this is just one of those books where when you start getting to the end, you're like, fuck, what am I going to read next, A little bit of notes here. This was published in 1960, so some of the political situations there in Africa have changed since he wrote this. Alan Moorhead, 360 pages. And the other book that I read by him was titled Fatal Impact, and it was also about exploration and colonialism, but it kind of followed around Captain Cook and what happened to island nations after their brush with Europeans. The first thing that it covers is my old buddies, Speke and Burton, and these are the guys that I just read about, and I keep getting the feeling that Speke, which nobody has even heard of, deserves a lot more credit than he got. And there was also a guy named Grant that went with Speke after Speke had kind of split with Burton. And Grant also, it covers Livingston, Stanley, a guy named Baker that I didn't know a whole lot about. Of course, Pasha Gordon is covered. The Mahdi is covered. And it also, towards the end, covers a guy named Emin. And Emin was a German guy that, Emin wasn't his real name. He adopted a Muslim name and the Muslim faith. Because most of his men were Arabs, and that way that it was more acceptable to them. And I don't know, Emin was just a pretty interesting guy. Towards the end, Emin gets rescued by Stanley, and Emin doesn't even want to be rescued. He just wants to spend the rest of his life there categorizing plants and animals, and he's a very scientific Poindexter type guy. But he does get rescued by Stanley, brought back to civilization, and Emin has extremely bad eyesight. And I have read about this before. He's at this party, this gala, where they're toasting Stanley and Emin is on the second floor, and he walks right through a fucking window and falls nearly to his death. He does recover, but he's like never the same. Bottom of 237, top of 238. I can't remember what this even is. I am reading another book, and I'm continuing with Africa. This is regarding Gordon and the Mahdi and Khartoum and Omdurman. There is a faded quality about the events of the next 6 months, an air of pure and certain tragedy that lifts the story out of time and space so that it becomes part of a permanent tradition of human courage and human helplessness. It can be repeated just as a Shakespearean tragedy can be repeated, and it never alters. The values remain the same in every age, and the principal characters are instantly recognizable. We would no more think of their playing different roles from the ones they actually played than we would dream of withholding death from King Lear or of rescuing Hamlet from his hesitations. Each of the three main protagonists, Wolseley coming up from the Nile with his soldiers, Gordon waiting and watching on the palace roof in Khartoum, and the Mahdi with his warriors encamped in the desert outside the town behaves precisely as he is destined to do, and it is wonderfully dramatic that these three men, who were so perfectly incapable of understanding one another, should have been thrust together in such desperate circumstances and in such an outlandish corner of the world. Each man is the victim of forces which are stronger than himself. The Mahdi, having raised a holy war, is bound to assault Khartoum. Gordon, having committed his word to the people in the town, is bound to remain there to the end. And Wolseley, the soldier, having received his orders, is bound to try and rescue him. None of these three really controls events. None of them can predict what will happen. From time to time they feel hope or despair, confidence or uncertainty, and in the main they simply hold on to their predestined courses, and they are like the pilots of three ships in a fog that are headed for an inevitable collision. I just love the way this guy writes. That kind of sums it up. You can read entire books about the Mahdi, and I have. You can read entire books about Gordon, and I also have that. And you can read entire books just about the Wolseley expedition to try and rescue Gordon, or what's going on in England, how they're raising, how they're trying to get Gordon. And my note here says, it really is a good story no matter how many times I've read it. Amin and Stanley, I've already got into that a little bit. There is a map on page 325. And this is just a wonderful map. It folds out, and with different colors, it has all the tracks of these explorers. And just at a glance, you can tell that Speke, has done so much more than the others. My last here is a footnote on page 337. This is about Kitchener. I don't like Kitchener. Kitchener got the death that he deserved. I will never forget reading about Kitchener ordering his men to certain death at Paardeberg when they had Cronje. Cronje was in an entrenched Boer lager, and the Boers were the best shot in the world. And Kitchener orders a frontal assault, and it's just he's ordering his men to their death. Kitchener, like Howard, who incidentally had ridden with Churchill in the charge of the 21st Lancers, but he had no love for war correspondence in general. Until overridden by Salisbury, he refused to allow them to advance with the vanguard, and directly after the fall of Omdurman, they were sent back to Egypt. Shortly before the battle, they were kept waiting for a long time outside Kitchener's tent, hoping to obtain a statement from him. At length he emerged and strode through them, saying, "Get out of my way, you drunken swabs." I thought that was really funny. Kitchener was a big guy. He was like 6'2", so he probably intimidated those war correspondents. Kitchener was also a very weird guy. If you got him in a room with politicians and they began to question him, he slipped into some type of a weird catatonic state. You could like hypnotize him by asking him too many questions. He was much better in the field. Thanks for watching.